If I can see them, sorry.
I just use it for Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix, Roku. Oh, sorry.
Says the guy who's watching, you know, scrolled in well past
The, what's the date today? The October 28th meeting of the Sewer Authority Midcoastside Board of Directors is called to order. Roll call, please.
Director Kowalczyk?
Here.
Director Alfano?
Here.
Chair Warren?
Present.
Vice Chair Harvey?
Here.
Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Clark?
Here.
Please stand for the
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2, public comment or oral communication for items not on the agenda. I see no speaker slips. Does anyone have any comments for items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on. There's our closed session. Item 4, consent agenda. Any items to be held for discussion? I have one minor question. I don't think it's raised. Holding it off to consent, I'm just wondering why it costs money to dispose of fluorescents. I dispose of them for free.
We have lots of them. We have a service that actually does that. They give us boxes to tube. We have tons of tubes here. And
You drop off at the recycle yard and just, oh, you're not in ecology, so.
yeah. We're also not home-based, so they won't do that.
All right, so is there a motion for consent agenda?
So moved.
And that's all items as listed on consent?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved. Item 5A, old business, approved increase in total contract amount with Anderson Pacific Engineering Construction, Inc. for the Granada Force Main Repair Project from $1,270,081 to $1,328,581.
So this item is more of a housekeeping item at this point, and Tony noticed that I had not included information on the change orders, so we did print them out and he has them. So Anderson Pacific has completed their work, and during the course of the work, there were some change orders that were brought to the board, change orders 4, 5, and 6, and they were approved by the board. But in the final payment, after reviewing the final amount was more than had been approved by the board, so we went back and looked through all of the different board discussions and agenda items and found that change orders 1, 2, 3, and 8, 7 was actually a $0 change order, had not been approved by the board, but had been authorized for payment and had been paid other than retention. So this agenda item augments the overall, requests an augmentation of the overall contract amount, which started at $1,209,101 and was augmented once to account for change orders 4, 5, and 6, and needs to be augmented one more time to account for 1, 2, 3, and 8. And so the request is to add $58,500 to the total project amount for a total amount of $1,328,581.
Through the chair. Huh? Sorry, so another $60,000, the vendor's been paid? But we're
Other
just-
than retention, the vendor's been paid, and it appears that the augmentation was not brought to the board.
What was the time frame of that?
Do we have dates on those, Tony? Or any other change orders on that list?
No.
And they would have been, 4, 5, and 6 were approved in July, so they would have been before July. I would.
Okay, so there's $60,000 spent before July that we never saw.
That's correct.
I don't really like that.
Yeah, it won't happen in the future.
Okay, we don't know why, because it's all
the horses out of the barn and.
Yeah, well, I think we need to change and actually SRT would ask me to make a clarification to the staff memo also, which I forgot to do, so I would. They wanted to clarify that some of the changes were requested by SAM staff and negotiated by SRT, for however that adds value to this discussion. But I think in the future, what I've seen is that if you have a consultant managing construction, the consultant recommends for approval, but an agency manager approves, and then they know whether to bring it to the board or not. And it wasn't clear that occurred through this. I don't think that's part of SAM's process, but it will be moving forward.
Yeah, when I read the staff report, I thought it was a bit odd that the construction manager approved it without it coming with you.
It seemed, well, these all occurred, in the spring or summer of this year. So they would have come to the other manager, but I don't, just from the change orders that have occurred since I've been here, which are the ones that are actually discussed under Proven, those change orders are approved by the construction manager and then they show up on an invoice. They don't get approval by agency. I don't know do you know if Steve approved change orders?
Steve has discussions with them,
Yeah.
could be.
I don't know if there's I can look to find out if there's documentation that shows that Steve signed change orders, but that has not been the process since I've been here.
So when a project's ongoing, and the contractor comes to the project engineer and says, hey, I've got to do X, Y, Z, it wasn't in it, we need to do this, the leader says, yeah, okay, let's do that. So then, after the fact, they will then end up coming to the board. I mean, you're not gonna stop the project, right?
Well, what the most elegant way to address this is to have some kind of a contingency for change orders. It could be 5%, usually it's 5%. Depends on the size of the contract. It could be 2% on a huge contract. So there's a little bit of leeway to negotiate these things during the contract, and then as these changes are negotiated, they're presented to the board for information, and if an additional contingency is needed, that's approved ahead of time. Because you're right, you can't stop construction to wait to bring a change order to the board.
I don't remember exactly, but I think like when the city is letting a street project go or something of that nature, I thought I remembered the percentage being a little higher, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10%. And I think it's something that we would approve in the original resolution, saying, okay, the project's $1 million, and it can go up as much as $1.1 million or $1.2 million without needing additional approval. If it's going to exceed that, then it needs to come back. And then when it's finally wrapped, we get to see though, oh yeah, it come out to be 1,105 or whatever, but was in the parameter. So
Right.
I would think that would be a good way to handle it, because we always know that usually these things are going to be a little more than what we expect. And I think that's the smarter way to do it. I don't know what that right number is, 5 or 10%.
So, through the chair, I just want to voice my concern that I want the manager to have the authority to run the business. But I also expect to be, as a director, I also expect to be informed. We're going to spend $60,000, and this is before your tenure, but I think it's only reasonable, right? This is, here's another 60. Oh, look, there's 20 more. Oh, right. How about that?
Do you know what the estimate on the original bid was for change orders?
Well, there was no contingency at all for change orders.
Was there any estimation in the for what we might expect in the way of exceedances? Because I mean, we normally budget for that. We never budget for strictly what's bid.
Was there anything more put in the budget?
I have to research it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that expectation should be set at the point where we put out for bid.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we ought to be looking at right now is where do we measure against what our expectation was, not the particulars of individual change orders. Although, I mean, that could be interesting, but that's almost never the point. It's about what the budget expectation was set at, and that's been some time ago, right? So over a year.
Right.
The issue for me though is that it didn't come back to agency staff for approval.
Well, we don't know that.
Time,
we actually don't know that. There was a discontinuity in staffing, as you may recall. So, you know,
But
Well, I think the change orders would have come back to agency staff through the progress payment requests, which were approved and paid. So the staff did know of the overages.
Scott, in the.
do we know whether these were SAM initiated or contractor initiated change orders?
They're looking through, you know, there might have been some SAM, I don't know from the description, I can't tell, I mean, there were some that were not. There was a change order related to power line.
That was ours, right?
Well, that would have been,
You know, we have to ask for that, because that was something the contractor didn't, I remember when we heard that item, and we did discuss that in great detail, so that
That was the crane issue?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So, you know, conditions on the ground, it's like, wow, you know, we don't want somebody getting electrocuted, so.
right,
And
right.
PG&E wasn't gonna allow it anyway, so.
Okay. And then there were some new air valves and manholes, relocation of a bypass station, so, you know, not having been part of this job, I don't know how much of it was contemplated and how much of it was required due to field conditions. And the change orders are change orders, and they, you know, I think we should presume that they needed to get done, or they wouldn't have gotten done, and that a fair price was negotiated. The only item that I'm asking here is that we augment the budget so that, from a contractual perspective, you know, the board has funded the project before we make a progress payment to the contractor. We don't wanna make a progress payment to the contractor that's in excess of what was approved by the board.
Scott, I was just going by the comment in the middle of the paragraph where it says, during the project, the construction manager approved additional work.
That doesn't say anything about who initiated it.
Right, but, you know, in terms of did it come to the manager here, you know, I interpreted that to mean.
If the manager is the one who pushed on the issue and asked for the change, then, well, yes, implicitly, but we don't have staffing continuity to be able to answer that question easily.
It would have come to the manager though, because the manager had to sign the progress payments and the contractor was paid. So yes, the issues did.
Okay, so even though it says the construction manager approved it, you're saying the construction manager would have come back to the SAM GM on it?
My recollection from what we know of the progress, and I asked for a fair bit of progress along the way anyway, was that we had a number of things where conditions on the ground necessitated change orders, and so absent evidence to the contrary, I would presume that all of these were things that we asked for.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the change orders or the dollar amount for the change orders. I just think that we need to have board approval to augment the project so that what we're paying the amount that we're paying has been authorized by the board.
Well, I would then offer a motion with two pieces to it. One would be a motion to approve the increase in the total contract amount from Anderson Pacific Engineering Construction for the Granada Force Main repair from $1.27081 million to $1.328581 million. Number one. Number two, which if I look at the original, it looks like it's 1,209. Take it to the eventual cost, it's just under 10%, which to me, I know it's still a lot of money. It's about 120,000. It still seems like something that is fairly normal with a large project. So my second part would be that the manager bring back to the board some guidelines, some written guidelines of how we're gonna control the project in the future, what percentage we wanna use to allow these kind of things to happen, and then at what point is board approval needed, so forth.
I second the motion in the soliloquy.
Thank you so much.
I would offer that the level that should come back to the board is when the amount of change order exceeds the manager's discretionary threshold, whatever that is.
But that's what we need to get defined. Yeah.
So I second
Not really. Well, yeah, my feeling is that once, I mean, the manager's authority is established by the policy, but once the expenditure, the initial expenditure matches that amount and has to go to the board, it seems that anything above that should be approved by the board. And the reason why I say that is because you could end up paying a lot of money for something because the base amount of $1 million or whatever was approved by the board and everything else is within the manager's discretion. So it just seems to me that the manager's discretion should set the lower limit. That's just my own personal opinion. The board is welcome to take whatever position it wants on that.
I agree with that statement, I still second your motion.
Any further discussion?
Could you restate the motion, please?
The motion would be two parts. One, to approve the increase in the total contract amount from 1.27 to 1.328. And then secondly, to have the manager bring back to us a written policy of how we're gonna handle these type of situations in the future. And like I said, my assumption would be, when we approve a project like this, I think we give the manager a percentage to work with, 5%, 10%, whatever. And then whatever, if that's gonna be exceeded, then the manager needs to come back to us and say, oh, we're going beyond what you approved. So, two parts, one, approve it. Number two, come back with some written procedures of how we handle this in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Item 5B, accept Granada Force Main Repair Project and adopt a resolution. Next in sequence, a resolution accepting completion of work and directing filing of notice of completion. General Manager.
Oh, so the notice of completion and resolution accepting completion of work, these are standard contract documents. They establish the period will go to the county tomorrow, and if approved by the board, file the notice of completion, and that starts a 35-day lien period. During that period, the contractor, any of its subs, any of its suppliers are required to provide, if they haven't been paid by the contractor, provide that information to SAM. If after that 35-day period ends, we don't have any issues related to liens, then we would release the final retention to the contractor. And so this agenda item requests authorization of the notice of completion, adoption of the resolution, and also authorization for staff to release the retention after the 35-day period. And the intent is not to come back to the next board meeting to ask for the release of retention, because it does need to be released on that 35th day.
So would that need to be added to the recommended motion, which doesn't refer to release of retention?
Yeah, it should have been in the original motion.
I have a question for either the general manager or council. It seems to me that we've rarely done filing a notice of completion. So under what conditions is that done, and versus when it's not?
Well, first, it's interesting, we haven't done a lot of public works projects at SAM. All of a sudden, within the last couple of years of the pump station repairing, and the wet weather flow project was probably the first one we did in 5 or 6 years. But any public works project, this is the procedure. Nobody can file a lien against the project because it's a public works project. So the statutory procedure is you record, once this project has been accepted, you record a notice of completion with the county recorder. That starts a 35-day time period within which anybody who has a claim is supposed to file that claim with the public agency. And after 35 days if no claims are filed, that contractor, per the contract documents, is entitled to his money. The withhold that we've had.
So even though this is a repair, it still counts as a public works project?
This was a public works project, yeah.
Now, I don't think we did this for the emergency repair of the line under the road here, the sewer plant road, the driveway leading to the plant.
That, I don't know, I'd have to go back to the record and see, and it wasn't a public works project?
Well, the line was at risk of collapse, and we did the emergency sleeve lining of it.
We may not have had a contract, it may have been just an emergency order from, I just don't know, Leonard, what we did there. But I know in the digester repairs, the Granada pump station, the wet weather flow project, and what's the fourth one that we're working on? We're following this, should be following this procedure in each case.
Okay. Any further questions?
And maybe just to finish that for the rest of the board, because we haven't done a lot of these. The contract documents contemplate a withhold from each progress payment of a certain percentage, and it's 5%. And that money is held until we get through this stop notice procedure, and that's the money that gets released if there's no claim that gets filed. And of course, we're hanging on to that 5% until that time, in case there is a claim that's filed. And what the manager just mentioned is that at the end of 35 days, that contractor is entitled to that as a matter of statute. So it doesn't have to come back to the board. It would come back to this board if we've got some notices that, some claims that are filed by subcontractors.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. Do you have a motion?
I move to adopt Granada Force Main Repair Project and adopt resolution accepting completion of work and directing the filing of notice of completion.
And also the part about releasing the retention.
And
What would language for that be? Authorized release of retention at the end of 35 days if no claims are filed?
That's it,
okay.
it's in the resolution, so if you're adopting the resolution.
Okay. We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded, any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, the resolution next in order is adopted. Item 5E, approve increase in total contract amount with Proven Management, Inc. for the digester cleaning project from $89,245 to $93,976.
And this is a similar request with Proven Management, who recently completed the digester repair project. Again, this project, the total contract amount was approved without any contingency for change orders, but there were some change orders on the project. There were two, raising the contract to $93,976. So this item requests that the board augment the total project amount by $4,731 to $93,976.
Since nitpicking is my second job, staff report says repair, but this was just the cleaning project?
Yes. And we did some additional work that were included a repair. We took advantage of some of the equipment that they had on site in a slow period that they had.
I guess I forgot about that part.
But yeah, it was a cleaning job.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the increase in total contract amount with Proven Management for the digester repair project from $89,245 to $93,976.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Item 5D, accept digester cleaning project and adopt resolution next in order, a resolution accepting completion of work and directing the filing of notice of completion.
So this is similar to the Granada Force Main notice of completion and resolution. It also establishes the 35-day period during which any suppliers or subcontractors can submit liens. On this contract, the contract documents require us to withhold a 5% retention. During the course of the work, the retention was not held, but we do have sufficient amount left in the final payment to withhold the entire retention because it's a small project on this project. So the final progress payment will be issued without the 5% project retention, so that we have that amount to hold for the 35 days. And it's the same motion to adopt the digester repair project and also the resolution accepting completion of work and directing the filing of the notice of completion.
Any questions or a motion?
I make a motion we adopt the digester repair project and adopt resolution accepting completion of work and directing filing of notice of completion and eventual releasing of withheld funds.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item 5E, discuss and provide direction to interim general manager on request for proposals for legal services.
This item is on this agenda. It was actually brought up at the last meeting, but was not included on the agenda for the last meeting, so I put it on this agenda for further discussion. And just to add some introduction, since I've been here, our council has been very helpful to me because we're a small agency and there's just not a lot of continuity, you know, in terms of what's happened in the past. So, you know, everyone working here has their knowledge of what they do, but Jim has really provided the overall picture for me of why things are the way they are and what things have been discussed and agreed or not agreed to in the past. So it's been very, very helpful to me to continue to move the business of the agency forward. And so my recommendation at this point is, I think it would be very disruptive if we had a request for proposals and brought on a new council, and then if you brought on a new manager. It would be difficult for the new manager, I think, to be able to carry forward the business of the district without that continuity. So I would recommend that this RFP be deferred until after the new manager is in place.
Makes sense.
That sounds fine. Do we need a motion for that, or just give you verbal?
Well,
I move that we do nothing.
Since the board had previously directed issuance of the RFP, I think it's appropriate to actually have a formal action to say we're holding off on that for now.
We didn't do that by
Why?
motion, though.
I don't see the justification for choosing to wait to go to a motion on that, really.
I think it's more informational. I think as long as we're in agreement with that, then I think we're fine. We can say we go along with that recommendation, and then when the time is right, then we can put it back on the table.
I guess the reason I'm thinking that is so that somebody can't come along and say, well, the board directed that it be done, why isn't it being done?
The board is giving direction that we wait.
Well,
Giving direction,
it'll be in the minutes.
let the minutes reflect that the
Yeah.
board has been presented with this and
Yeah.
thinks that's a sound idea.
Okay,
So,
direction's been given.
all right.
Item 5F, discuss status of recruitment of general manager.
So everybody has in front of you one of these.
Looks
Looking very-
suspiciously like the previous
It
one.
does. So, these have been
Are we
distributed.
ever
They're
gonna clean
collecting-
these weeds up in front of the building?
Those aren't weeds.
You mean the pine needles?
That's ground cover.
Actually, a fair bit of that was in an area that was very carefully cultivated by a recently retired
And is that-
SAM employee, which included such wonderful delights as strawberries watered with treated effluent.
And has that fishing boat ever been reflooded? I mean, is it still?
It's still there.
It's still there.
You know,
The tide had just gone out.
I didn't think of this until after it had been sent off to the printer, but it, you know, I was looking at this and thinking, why are we using a beach boat as part of our recruitment?
You know, let me just point out that while you guys pick on that kind of stuff, look at the top photo. I mean, it's a sewer plant.
Well, yeah, there's that.
So, you know, you don't want to go too upscale, otherwise you might highlight, hey, this place we're asking you to come to work every day, it's a sewer plant. So.
Plus, there's a picture of the kitchen in the corner. I think that's impressive.
That's,
That would be a lab.
That'd be the
actually.
Lab.
It doubles.
Kitchen lab, whatever.
Please tell me we're not doing food prep there. So,
So,
it's got a handy microwave oven, right?
if I recall, we're waiting until something like.
November 1st.
November 1st is the deadline. We expect to hear from Bob Murray and Associates, the firm, not Bob himself, any day now.
Have we heard anything at all?
I was looking at my mail just now, and nothing in my mailbox just yet, but then again, we've still got like 4 days, so.
I would like to put something on the floor for consideration. Over the last couple months that we've had the interim GM here on board, I have been extremely impressed with the knowledge and the approach to some issues I wasn't even really sure existed here. We just took a tour of all the different pump stations in the plant, and it was a real eye-opener, I have to admit. Getting out there and seeing some of this stuff was an eye-opener. So what I'd like to consider is that we think about requesting that the interim GM put a proposal on the table to come on as a permanent manager. I'm thinking it could be on somewhat of a part-time basis. I'm thinking 3 days a week, whatever. And I also think we would have to look at a comparison between a full-blown 5-day-a-week GM and all the costs that we would incur with that, along with bringing on Vivian's firm in some type of a part-time situation. Like I said, the professionalism of what I've seen so far has really impressed me, and I would really like to continue on with some of the things that have gotten started and at least see them through completion. Doesn't mean we may stay like that forever, but I think right now there's been some amazing things that have been happening, and I'd like to see them continue.
I think the first thing we need to find out is whether Vivian would
Well,
have any.
honestly, before we get to that, honestly, I believe that the way that we've currently got it structured, we would be in an awkward position, a bit of a conflict position, since it's an odd position, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm not sure it's not doable.
I think it's a fine idea to think about, but I think given that we're actually asking her to oversee the operation of the plant and, you know, the whole operation here, and typically, like if you look at situations where, well, I'm concerned about conflict of interest in asking that in the midst of this process that we shift and introduce someone who we're currently asking to oversee the organization to do this. And I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think it's entirely unlike the situations you get into with where like a city board member might want to apply for the position. The state simply doesn't allow that. And I don't know that it's sufficiently different from that situation. So I'm not comfortable with it at first blush. I might be persuaded, but I think it might be problematic.
If you look around, you know, interim police chiefs are routinely hired as police chiefs, interim fire chiefs are routinely hired as fire chiefs, interim city managers are routinely hired as city managers. So there's no difference between all those.
Well, there may be some difference in terms of the expectations set at the beginning of that process, and we certainly did not anticipate this. Vivian made it very clear at the outset that she was not looking for a permanent, so that was clearly not anticipated in what we set up.
So,
Right.
if I offer my opinion, 2 things. One, I want to ask Vivian, A, we can just, if you can answer later, but is that at all appealing and of interest? But before you go there, my opinion about this discussion is that if our interim GM is interested in filling a role and believes it can be done in part-time basis, whatever, then I think that proposal, that approach becomes part of the mix that we evaluate. And then we're gonna get 11 candidates from Bob Murray and Associates, and we may or may not get a proposal from Vivian Housen, and then we have a decision to make. And we are the hiring authority, and we should hire the person for that job that we wanna hire. So that's.
I agree with that. I'd note that there's a deadline, November 1st, for anyone who's interested in applying, so that's, if we had talked about this at the beginning, I think it'd be very different, but I'm very conservative when it comes to, you know, altering mid-flight on this kind of thing, especially when someone is in a position of, you know, the position of greatest authority in the administration of this organization.
Yeah,
in the middle of
what's
this.
the basis, Scott, I want to understand. So I know you're sort of reluctant with this, and I guess I don't understand why. The reason I say that is my observation is that it's, not to throw too much sunshine at you, but Vivian's performance has been pretty exemplary.
Yeah, it's not about Vivian or her performance.
I know, but
So
but because of that, I say, wow, if I'm the part of the hiring authority, I want those credentials to be part of our consideration set.
It's specifically not about the individual filling the role. It's about our process, and if there's actually a conflict of interest because of the position, then that's something I'd want some time to think through. I'd like to see counsel on that. And
I don't see it, but that's fair, you should
well,
think through that.
yeah, and that's my concern. It's not about the individual, it's about, and I understand, going, hey, this is more of this, right? I get that. I mean, and I hear that.
And you're right, I mean, this was in my head several months ago, but over the last couple of meetings, the handling of certain projects, and I have to tell you, the tour and the discussions we had about the facilities and a lot of different issues really opened my eyes up that we're extremely lucky to have somebody on board right now who I think is a really good fit for our organization. So that's the reason I'm putting it on the table, assuming that Vivian's open to it. I think we should at least discuss if we're open to that idea of bringing on a part-time situation. And then if we are, then I agree, we have to consider, are there any potential conflicts? If there's candidates coming to us, are we now gonna ask Vivian to look them over and rate them for us? Or are we now gonna have to put a firewall up and
As
say?
I recall, at the last meeting, you expressed a very strong interest in having Vivian offer her advice on the resumes we get. So
But we don't have to follow through with that.
we don't have to follow through with it, but Rick asked, and I'm answering about my concerns, and the concerns are about changing horses midstream in terms of our process and expectations set at the beginning, both in the job search and in bringing the interim. This was not contemplated, specifically not contemplated, because the conditions set initially wouldn't have allowed for it. So I'm gonna raise the caution. I think, I certainly understand where you're coming from, and I'm not objecting to that. I think I'm very understanding that, I hear you. But I think we do well as we, do our job of oversight here to keep an eye to potential conflicts. And it would be, like I said, I don't know that it's the same thing as a board member who tries to apply for a position like that. We had that situation here in town just a few years back, and
With this board.
no.
Yes.
Okay, there was also that
Yes.
situation with another board here in town, and that's CCWD. One of the board members wanted to apply for the position. And this is why I learned about the law. I read up on it at the time, and it's interesting, and it's not as intuitive as I would have thought at first, but having read through it now, I'm more sensitive to would this be a conflict? And it's not an easy no for me. That's why I bring it up.
I understand that conflict thing really well, because GSD's engineer at the time I started on the board was a board member of West Bay Sanitary who applied for the job as manager over there without resigning from the board first, and he ended up under court order giving back a year's salary. So, and you can Google it, I'll tell anybody later off camera what to search for, and you can read all about it.
But it's just an issue that,
it's a watershed case.
that's why I bring it up early instead of later. It's like, if there's a problem here, then let's look for it before we step into it, right?
So I certainly think we should look into it, because I remember by the end of the interview thinking that I would like to hire as the general manager and skip the interim step, but I didn't bring it up because Vivian had indicated that she only wanted to be interim.
Through the chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Vivian, we're talking about you. Can you share your thoughts?
I would be happy to stay on as long as you would like me to. I think there's a lot of work that should be done here. I don't think it's forever. I think a lot of it can be taken care of in relatively short term. You did ask the question, you know, if I were to stay, I think the only condition under which I could stay would be under contract, could not become an employee. And the reason is because I do work for other agencies, and so if I were an employee here, then I wouldn't be able to continue my other work. So, you know, that's really a limitation that I have. But as a contract manager, I'm very happy to stay as long as you need me or want me to stay.
So I think that we should continue on with Bob Murray and see what he has to come up with. And then with Scott's precautions and your enthusiasm, all kept in mind, and she's saying that she doesn't want to do this permanently. And we'll just see what we get, and we'll just go on step by step and see what happens.
Should we ask council for a short report on whether there's any conflict or anything?
Conflict with what specifically?
Well, in regard to Scott's concerns.
Conflict with us hiring her directly to be part-time.
Well, whatever Scott's concerns are.
We've been given the current position, given the expectations set up at the beginning of the arrangement. Would there be a conflict in entertaining this and acting on it? So to ask that question, would there be a conflict of interest before we really embark down that path?
Well, I think it's clear that we're going with, we're getting candidates. We have to consider those candidates.
Yeah.
So we're going through this process. If we consider her in some kind of position, that'd be an optional thing, but I don't know, it would be a conflict to have her involved in this process.
Well, I
And
think
be
there were
considered.
two things, I think, that Scott was concerned, and I wasn't at the last meeting, but apparently there was some desire at the last meeting for her to sort of screen applicants. I think you'd have to revisit that question.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
sure,
fair.
yeah.
So, but that was one of the concerns that Scott expressed just a few minutes ago. The other one is the one you expressed, which is the Schrader case down in West Bay.
So
Yeah, but
let's
I
take
don't
them
see
one
that
at a
as
time.
applicable
So
there.
let's take them one at a time. Given this discussion, knowing that for Scott's concerns, we're gonna get some more information, I'd like to ask Vivian to prepare a proposal to serve in this position, interim, to serve as a GM on a contract basis, and to provide that with your credentials to Bob Murray so that we can review that. And I'd like to also suggest then you're not part of the resume review loop with Bob Murray, because you would be a candidate in that mix.
Can I ask a question? Rick, financially, what would that shake out to be? I mean, I think
Well,
it'd be
her
more
prices might be so,
expensive.
or not, her prices might be so ridiculous that we say, oh, hey, thanks Vivian, have a good day, or they might not be, that's up to Vivian Housing and
From
Associates.
what I understood, she's working, how many days are you working here in the office? 2 days?
I've been invoicing the agency about 14 hours a week.
So that's what,
Call it two.
2 days, and we're paying just about the equivalent of what we paid the previous general manager for that time. So the way I did the calculation previously, we're ending up.
Well, Jim, obviously that wouldn't be acceptable,
For 2
right?
days what we paid
Right,
previously for
so-
full time.
So a proposal that said that wouldn't be acceptable, right? So
Yeah,
then that
yeah.
shakes, that comes out in the wash.
Yeah, so we have to be careful. I mean, I don't think.
I don't even think it's careful, I think it'd be really obvious. If it's too expensive, it's too
Okay.
expensive.
Yeah, it's too expensive.
When you're comparing with the cost of the general manager, are you factoring in the benefits beyond salary? 'Cause if I look at this, is this 1 month's milling on this tech report? 'Cause that's 11,000 plus, so that's 121,000 a year. And the general manager plus benefits was over 200,000, I think. Is that right?
I think the salary was like 166.
166.
And you figure benefits at 50%,
Yeah,
that's 240,000?
He didn't have medical, he didn't have certain benefits because he had them
Yeah.
Okay, but it's
Call it
still
two.
well over 200,000 a year that the previous general manager cost.
So-
Perhaps.
Can I suggest we not try to figure out what a proposal might be like?
Right.
And we just get one and we say, hey, it's good, or hey, it's really bad?
Okay, but my point
I mean,
is,
Jim, I get your point, right?
I think it's.
I would agree with you, Jim, if it's,
So are we gonna make the decision now to not have her look at the candidates when they come in, or what are we gonna do?
Well-
What do you wanna do?
it's my suggestion. And that we consider a
Um,
proposal from Vivian.
Well,
And then-
let's just try it this way. If Vivian decides that she's going to submit a proposal, then we would ask her to not be involved in the candidate review. Does that work for everybody?
Well, we have a process here. Bob Murray is gonna give us some candidates, we're November first, Scott?
Well, that's the
close.
deadline, so they have to get them together and
So I was, so we're gonna hold off on getting,
No.
on what we do with Bob Murray's
No.
candidates?
No?
No.
What were we gonna do?
no,
Nothing
we can't
changes.
hold off on that. It's,
Okay.
we're pretty well into this process, so we gotta
There's
see
a
this through.
contract.
Nothing
So-
changes.
Okay, so how are we gonna handle this? Do you want to, get those candidates and then make a decision? Have her look at them and then?
So in my mind, it looks like this.
Well, what's the sequence?
So in my mind, it looks like this. So, when we started this process, somebody contacted me and said, hey, hire me for this job. I wanted this job. I'm really great. Here's 11 reasons why I'm great.
I got one of those too.
I said, hey, give me your resume. And I held it, and then Bob Murray came on and said, here's one. It's in the pot.
Okay,
And now Bob Murray's going out and doing this, and they're gonna get 20 more,
okay,
all right? And then potentially we'll get another one, put it in the pile. Bob Murray will go through, sort,
okay.
prioritize, and say, we got 30, here's 6 we feel really strongly about. This subcommittee, will then look at those and say, of those 6, is there anybody worth bringing in for an interview?
Right.
And then from that, we'll decide if there's somebody hireable.
Oh,
That's the
And,
process.
and we left the option open from the very earliest that we might want to discuss with these people the possibility of not 5 days a week. I mean, we kick that around all the time.
Yeah.
We kicked it around, before we got Jack Foley and decided, yeah,
That's all-
we'd
that's
go
all
for
to
4
us.
days. We've got the flexibility to do those kind of things,
Mhm.
right? So we've got a process, let's go through the process. One of the things I wanna make sure of is if we've got a candidate who's in a position of authority with Sam now, that we give some thought to whether or not this creates a situation for the applicants that might be construed as unfair. So, that's another thing, if you could give that a little bit of thought, we don't wanna get into that, right? So,
From the first resume?
well, we've got the process, and then if something goes in an unexpected way, we've got people who've put their resumes in, and
We should give them full consideration.
That's right.
And I wanna
That's right.
hire the best person.
and so we've got to avoid even the appearance of, you know,
Favoritism.
yeah, well, if there's any
Yeah.
way it can be misconstrued, we need to steer wide of that, right?
So can I suggest that Bob Murray give the search committee the candidates, and that would include Vivian's,
If she.
wants to-
Vivian's
Mhm.
package also.
And yours, Jim, if you wanna apply, yours too.
He
But
can't.
he'd have to get off the board.
That we're clear
Okay,
on.
okay.
So Bob Murray will give to you and Scott the package, which may or may not include Vivian, okay, and
Yes.
Alan, which may or may not include Vivian. And then will not have Vivian look at them at that point, the board will look at them first.
Right.
Is that okay?
The subcommittee,
The subcommittee will look at them.
and then bring forward the ones that we recommend.
And I think typically
Okay, Scott?
the committee has been, in the past, I think the committee has been told, bring up to 3,
Well, the committee is so powerful, they can bring 4 if they want. It's gonna be okay.
We never hear the
It's not that big a
approval
deal.
for.
That's
So
crazy.
just-
That's
just
crazy
resumes.
talk.
Could I suggest a corollary to that? Because I have been, if you don't, would that be okay?
Of course.
which,
So I have been the interim manager at a few other places and seen this process. I think that I can provide value in evaluating candidates. A lot of times what comes through on paper and what comes through in the interview is not, what it sounds like, because people interview to try to get jobs. So I can kind of help help translate some of what might be said. You know, I'm happy to stay on. I think if you find a great candidate, though, you should bring that candidate on. So, my suggestion is that you keep me on, and if I could be part of, you know, your discussions and selection, I would love to do that. And if you find a great candidate, you've got them. And if you don't find them, then you ask Bob Murray to go out and do round 2. And then I'll just stay and continue what I'm doing until you get your next batch of candidates. I mean, there are good people out there, so I think you don't want to limit, you know, your ability to talk to those people. And sometimes they don't come through the first time, sometimes they come through 6 months later. It just depends on when they are looking for work. So, so I think you know, you would, I do think it'd be, if I were to, I mean, I'm happy to submit also, and if I were to submit, you know, then I wouldn't feel that I was doing my job that you brought me on to do, which is to help lead you through this transition. So an alternative would be to just have me continue to do what I'm doing, and then, you know, you continue to search for your candidate. If you find the great person, great, and if you don't feel that you have, we just continue.
Let's see, so
But
you're saying that then you would just continue operating your role in interim, and then either this round, next round, or the round after, we find a permanent. At that point, you'd have some overlap and some training, and then we, okay. Well, that's different, that's different than submitting a proposal, obviously. That's
Right.
basically keep it as it is. And then and your services are available to us as is, and you would not be the permanent.
And then I think you have the best of all worlds, because you have the freedom to search, and then people feel that there's, you know, great opportunity for them. And then if you like what you're seeing here in terms of the interim management, that continues as well, so you kind of get the best of everything.
So what with her corollary is we just go on with this process as before. You will share these with Vivian, the candidates with Vivian. She will give her opinion, and then we'll go step by step from that point. We may go through a second round. We may choose her to, if she presents a proposal, to stay with us longer, but we'll continue on with this process as it was originally set up.
So that's what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is like, hey, I'm flattered, you guys are really, really a terrific board, probably the best I've worked with, and I'm just summarizing.
That's correct,
And,
that's correct.
and the strengths she brings to the table are just to keep operating as we've been operating, and if she ends up being interim for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, that we get best of that world, and also her guidance on the review process, which is also just politely saying she prefers that to submitting a proposal, but she would if we asked her to. Did I get that right? Yeah, I got that right.
Okay.
Even the board part?
The board part was right on.
The most right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to submit a proposal also.
Remember that Bob Murray Associates is actually the first filter that, you know, they'll toss out most of the resumes before the committee even sees them. Because when you're hiring, you know, anybody these days, you typically get a lot of people who just aren't qualified for any position.
So through the chair, my position on this has evolved. And so I think based on what the interim GM said, I'm comfortable with that, and I think the support we're getting is exemplary, and I'm happy to keep working in that direction. So, and if a proposal does come through, we can change it, but it sounds like that's not the case.
I would certainly like the board to have the, you know, the option to consider converting the interim into long-term.
And you may decide that after you interview, you know, the first round candidates. I just feel that personally I can bring value to this process because I know so many people and have seen so many people interviewing for this job, so, you know, from all walks of life, and have worked with good managers and bad managers. So, I just, you know, and that's what you brought me on to do, was to help you through this process.
So that's a good point. So is it, I suppose after the fact, after a round or 2 rounds, we could say, oh, you know what, we're just not getting the caliber that we want. What other options do we have? Maybe we could look at something else.
All right, why don't we wind this up at this point and, you know, wait until we see what Bob Murray Associates feeds to us, and you know, then we'll have a better idea when we see what that first round looks like. So I don't think we're gonna get any further on this item.
We got more items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All right.
let's move on.
Okay then.
Okey-dokey.
Okay, 6A, authorize interim general manager to review 2004 policy on portable computer cost reimbursement and bring proposed updates to the board for consideration of a future meeting.
So this is, we have a policy for computer purchase, and it is outdated, it's 9 years old. And it's for the non-represented employees, and the policy has been practiced. And the time has come to practice it again, and looking at the policy, it's just not clear that the policy's not clear. The policy allows an employee to purchase a computer, and it authorizes 75% of that purchase to be paid by the district or by the agency. There are requirements for the computer. It's unclear whether software is included. It's unclear whether that computer replaces the computer that sits at the employee's desk or is brought to work to supplement that computer. I think there needs to be discussion if that computer is to replace the computer that sits at the desk, then there has to be consideration of ergonomics and how that computer will be used and set up in the workplace. And so what I would like to do is to take this policy and to work with staff and develop, put a little more clarity into this policy. Also want to look at the dollar amount. You know, in 2004, what you could purchase for $3,000 was different than what you can purchase today. So I think we should take a look at what really needs to be in this computer, the computer itself, and all the software and all the peripherals that I think would make this computer a workplace computer, and then decide what that dollar amount should be or not be. Then bring some suggestions back to the board for discussion at a future meeting.
Okay, that sounds great to me, sounds good to me.
This,
How about having board members have computers?
Well,
I'm just kidding.
so my opinion, so I think it's great, I think we should do this, and just in general, everyone needs to have the right tools to do the job. And we need to provide those tools. I know there's some instances where some staff buy their own stuff, and I think that should be included in this, and if there's a, bring your own device policy, we should think about that, but basically, my opinion is that we should provide all the tools needed to do your job.
Yeah, we discussed this before, what, 4 years ago, didn't we? Had a big discussion about this.
This was 2004.
well, we discussed it since 2004 and took no action.
I just hope that you don't actually make somebody get a 30 gig hard drive, because
No, that's
good luck
plenty.
finding one of those.
That's plenty.
I actually just pulled a 40 gig drive out of an old TiVo.
That's too big, I'm sorry, that's outside the policy.
Yeah, outside the policy.
Now, I mean,
I know, but also, I'm thinking this thing doesn't fit at all. It's 256 gig, it doesn't have a CD read writable.
You're gonna have to leave it outside.
Well, I think any
Doesn't
policy.
even have Ethernet.
So any
The
any
point
policy
It's
is
should
definitely
be-
not running
should
Windows
just be
XP
current
Pro.
standard.
the point goes to Alan on that one.
Yeah.
Now, the second and last bullet item actually was software, and so my interpretation of that always has been that the software in that list is required and included in the reimbursement.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
I would strongly oppose buying computers without software, just saying.
Ever heard of Linux?
Unless it's pirated.
So,
I'm curious, excuse me, through the chair, are these computers for employees to take home?
Well, so they're portable computers, the employees take them home. They're required to bring them to work and have them available at work, but it's not clear if it's the employee's only computer, or if they have their desktop computer and then they have a laptop computer. What do they do with two computers? Why does it have to be brought to work or not? All that stuff is just unspoken here, so.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, the original idea, and I was here when we created this policy, the idea was, we've got people who need to be able to hop on the SCADA from home. It's not right to ask them to do that on their own equipment. And we were coming into the era where having a laptop made a lot of sense for being able to do that. We did not, I think at the time, address the issue of whether or not this would be in lieu of a desktop machine. I would suggest that someone does this, we might want to have a monitor at their desk, but I wouldn't fully expect that this would be for a machine that comes and goes, so that our staff has access to our internal systems when they need it.
I think that the model that my company uses is something we should give a really hard look at here. My company provides computer age employee, and for those who don't know, my company's 3,000 miles from here. I've been to their office like twice. And so they provide a laptop, a docking station, a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor, and so it essentially acts like a desktop system, except that it's powered by something that's about this size, although it's not this one. And it works really well. On the few times when I've traveled, you know, I just pull the thing out of the docking station and go with it, and it's a laptop. So I really think the docking station's the right approach here, and so I would like staff to give serious consideration to that approach.
I dock at work, I plug into this little thing here.
I'd
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
all-
now you can dock any which way.
One of the things that was part of the discussion in the policy that we currently have in place was the notion that the employee might want to spend more money to get a machine that was more capable to go above and beyond the minimum requirements. And I can't imagine what one might do with a more capable machine, but I might point out that someone has exercised this to great effect. I think some of the photography work that I've seen as a result of that is fantastic, but I also know full well it has gotten good use for the work here at the agency.
I would agree with Leonard's concept. I mean, this, when I go to work in the morning, this docks on my desk with a 27-inch monitor and a full-size keyboard, and it's perfect. I mean, and then I take it home, go to a meeting, perfectly, Dell, HP, I think Lenovo have docks. So for the people that need portability and want to be able to take it home, I'd recommend something of this nature. But for everybody else, I think just a good, standard, solid desktop is the smart way to go. But I think you need to evaluate it. I'd highly recommend that anybody that has portables, they get solid state drives, they're pretty much indestructible. And then just also make sure if something does leave the office, that two things, we know we have rules on safeguarding data, and secondly, when they come back to the office, they have a backup drive. When they put it in the dock, it does an automatic backup, so they never lose anything. But I think that's the smart way to go for people that need the portability, but everybody else, just get them a desktop.
So we don't need a motion, right, this direction? So
Yeah, you're planning to work with staff to
Yeah.
work something.
I think it's a great idea, and we've heard some suggestions from the directors, but I think I'd love to hear you come back and tell us what you need, and whether it's laptops, other tablet devices, and I think we should give our staff the tools they need.
I would also like to hear a proposal for some approach that isn't so technology specific that we have to keep amending it, because I mean, everything on here is now silly. You know, minimum hard drive capacity is CD-RW, while the DVD-RWs have been standard for at least 5 years. And we're, well, yeah, okay, fine.
Or floppy disks.
And what's a floppy? I think I have one operable machine that still has a floppy drive. You know, the 10100, well, gigabit is pretty much standard now. You know, the operating system, the one that's listed here is obviously. So, you know, basically, if we could come up with a policy that on its own sort of keeps up with technology.
So I make a motion to
Nice.
authorize the general manager to review the portable computer code cost reimbursement policy and bring proposed updates to the board for consideration at a future meeting.
Second.
Aye.
So now
Aye.
second, any further discussion, those in favor say aye. Consideration of changes to November and December 2013 SAM board meeting dates. We actually discussed this at the beginning of the year and approved the meeting schedule.
Discuss that these 2 days would change. And now it's time.
I think there was no board agreement on moving the meetings.
Oh.
I think
So
we'll have
this
to go
is
to
just a
later in the year.
suggestion.
I think we'll have to go to later in the year.
Well, later
And
is
here
now.
we are,
So these changes are fine with me.
yeah.
Uh,
Can we just go ahead and what, cancel the December meeting?
Typically, what we've done is said that the meeting would be canceled unless something came up, and then it would be uncanceled. But you know, if we're talking about a different date, then it'd be a special meeting anyway, and so I don't think that we need to go through that much.
Well, we may wanna be working with, Murray and Associates, we may
Right.
want that meeting.
You can also wait until the November meeting to take action on the December meeting.
What I would
We can always
suggest
schedule
is that people sort of reserve the proposed December meeting date so that if we're gonna have a meeting in December, that everybody is kinda available.
So I move to reschedule the November 13th board meeting to November 18th, 2013, and to cancel the December 2013 board meeting.
Can we amend that to, I don't wanna cancel it outright. Because if we cancel it, then then the notice requirements are different. If it fails to convene for lack of a quorum, it's a different thing, so we can leave it on the calendar with the expectation that we're not gonna make the meeting.
I amend my motion I move to reschedule the November 13th board meeting to November 18th, November 2013 board meeting to November 18th, 2013, and to
December 16th.
Anticipate not meeting on
And to
December.
anticipate a meeting in December.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
It's been moved and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Keep up.
Aye. Come on. Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion is carried.
So the intent is that we're not gonna meet in December unless we need to meet in December.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has been the way it's been done for, I don't know,
Thank you, Scott, for
13,
the
14
motion
years.
to-
Where are we here? Item 6C. I think I previously announced that A and B is 5, but those are both 6A and 6B. 6C, adopt SAM resolution next in sequence reaffirming the investment policy and guidelines.
Jeanette?
Oh, sure. Each year, the SAM auditors question whether or not the agency has reaffirmed its investment policy, and they recommend that we do so. So as a matter of good measure, we bring this before the board each year. And no changes have been made to the investment policy for a number of years, since 2010 we have on this memo. But basically the resolution states the investment policy guidelines are attached, and we do abide by the guidelines therein. We invest in the local agency investment fund, which is LAIF, and we also have a money market account, which brings us a little bit of interest.
But-
And those are our investment vehicles at this time.
But everything is not in the, what was the second thing you said?
Money market account.
Everything that's not in the money market accounts in LAIF?
I'm sorry.
All the money that's not in the money market accounts in LAIF, so we don't.
Correct.
We don't have any of these other things.
Right.
Is there anybody besides me that thinks that we ought to delete treasury securities and US government home loan?
No, I think we leave it.
You say so.
I say so.
I know this is a silly question through the chair. Who decides what to invest where?
The board and the manager, I believe. Right now,
I
we
would-
invest in LAIF, that's
I-
our number one
My
investment
inclination was to
vehicle.
say treasurer.
Oh, well, yeah, board treasurer
Who's the treasurer?
Well,
and the manager, general manager.
Right.
fact of the matter is, as a public agency, LAIF is a really good place to leave money. It's
Right.
very, very conservative.
Right.
And,
It's stable.
yeah. Um,
Yeah, it's, very reliable in terms of the risk of losing principal is
Through-
about zero.
Through
but the
everything that
interest
we've
rate's
been
rather
through
low.
the past few years, Leif has just been solid,
Yep.
and we've never been concerned about having money there.
Does it come before us like once a year to show where it is and?
Every month we
The
get
link
the,
statement is attached to the financial statements every month here in your
Yep.
packet.
Okay, but we don't actually see it and bless it like once a year or
That's
something?
correct.
no, but you see it every month, and if we want to move things around, I mean, typically, we don't have a lot of need to move things around, but if we do, I would expect you would bring this to us and highlight
Right,
an
if we're
interest in
losing
doing
money.
something changing.
Yeah, we get a minimal return.
I mean, we don't have the money there to make money, we have the money there to,
Safeguard it.
Reserve, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion?
I would move to adopt SAM resolution next in sequence, reaffirming the investment policy and guidelines.
I second the motion. Been moved and seconded, any further discussion, those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, any abstentions, motion carries. Item 7, interim managers report.
So I have a few things to report. We've had quite a few items on the agenda. I guess the most exciting part of the report is on the CIP review. There have been a couple of meetings. The first was with the member agency managers, and there was a tour of the pump stations, but not the wastewater treatment plant. I was not able to attend that tour, but that tour was intended to provide clarification on the CMP and also get input from the member agency managers on other items that we might want to consider. After that tour, I had discussed with Tony that I needed to get out to these facilities, and at the same time, the two Half Moon Bay representatives had heard feedback from Alex about the tour, the original tour, and requested that they receive a tour to see what Alex saw. So we went out last week ago Monday to the facilities again. That was my first time to go, and I went through the plant and also each of the pump stations with the CMP documents, and also the notes from the member agency manager tour. And I would like to strongly encourage, and I did send a report out to the managers, and I'm hoping that they communicated this information to each of the representatives. But I encourage you to come to this tour, and I think, because of the Brown Act, we should limit the members on the tour to two each time, so.
Well,
I think
it's 4 votes,
Well,
and
it
so
is
if these
votes.
2 have gone, then the other 4 of us can go, and it's
Oh.
still not a problem.
Isn't it? Oh, is that how it works?
This is unique.
Oh, okay,
We
okay,
get-
well.
We
then
get more
can-
votes, we give 4 votes, they each get
Okay,
1
I
vote.
didn't realize that. I thought it was people and majority.
I'd
So-
appreciate it if you keep us more directly informed. I'm not counting on going through our managers.
Oh, okay.
On things like this, when you're interacting with board members, I would appreciate that you notify the entirety of the board.
The board and not through the managers. Okay,
Well,
absolutely.
I'm glad you're keeping the managers in the loop.
Yeah,
I'm asking to be directly
To be
informed.
directly. okay, absolutely.
In addition.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
I
Again,
actually had a
absolutely.
note on last month's agenda to go, and I forgot to transfer that to my calendar, and so I completely forgot about it, but if the 2 Half Moon Bay reps had been there, I wouldn't have been able to also be there anyway, so, yeah.
Okay.
You guys are good, it's great.
I'm interested
Great
in
to see
having
the
it
operation.
rescheduled.
If you come and don't
I
talk, you
know,
can
I've
come.
done it 3 times.
I've done it, or listen.
So, I mean, it's such a good walkthrough, and I mean, and I think to have Tony and myself there, and we're both pretty open about what we think needs to be done or doesn't need to be done, and what the issues are, so.
That
and-
reminds me about things to be done. So we just did a whole lot of work on the force main. That's not everything that we needed to do, right? So where does that stand in terms of what we've got teed up for finishing out? We had a whole bunch of recommendations, and we took what we could afford this time around, right?
Right.
Where does that leave us?
Well, so we looked at what we had in the recommendations, and the concern was, we only have a finite pot of money to spend. Are we spending it on the right stuff? Because it's very easy to spend money on things that you need to spend it on, because there's always a need. Are those the most critical items? And so that was what these meetings were about, and the tour was about. And I think we're gonna come up with a different priority. So, what we need to do next is to meet, the managers meet, and what we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do, is actually schedule a workshop, it'll be in the beginning of next year, to go through what we saw and hopefully what you will have seen if we can arrange the tours of the facilities. And then together, talk about all the issues and the criticality and the risk, and come up with a consensus on what are the most important items and not the most important items. And then we can lay those out and say, okay, then you have a finite pot of money, either per year or ever, and what do we need to spend that pot of money on first?
Well, I know how that works.
Yeah.
I asked about the force main.
So the force main work is done, right?
Well,
The
it's-
initial force main work.
But I think we have more
We've got miles
bypass
of line
stations.
there, so
Well, so you have additional force main, you also have gravity line, you also have pumps that are
Mm-hmm.
failing, you have electrical reliability. I mean, there are a lot of stuff, so the force main is one item, and off the top of my head, from what I've seen, it may not be the most critical.
Well,
It may not be,
I believe that the electrical is by far,
Right.
That's critical. But I also saw a section of cut pipe that showed really bad corrosion,
Mhm.
and it was brought to our attention that we've got many more lineal feet of that we may need to deal with.
Right.
So since we just did the completion on the project, we just voted on that tonight, I think it's an appropriate time to get an idea of how's the rest of that sit. That's what I'm asking.
I thought.
And I'm really not satisfied with, we're gonna put everything on the table and sift it out and talk about that in a few months.
right.
We just did the completion notice on this project tonight, and this is an appropriate time
Well,
to have at least a bit of a heads up on where we are with the rest of it.
We do have time to think about it and make sure it's the right thing to do, because we cannot take that force main out during wet weather, and we are now in the wet weather season. So we wouldn't be able to do any construction until.
I understand
next
that.
spring. So
We typically don't do any construction in the wet weather
Right.
at all, not just because of the concerns about the force main, but
Right.
because we find it very difficult to get permits, and we really don't want to work during the wet season because we have tremendous erosion problems.
But realistically, if we start the planning now, we might be ready at the end of the rainy season anyway.
We have to start planning now if we want to get projects spun up for the summer.
That's
And,
correct. I think we need to start planning for, we need to start planning for whatever it is we're gonna tee up this summer. I think we have, 4 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it's gonna take to figure out. What we don't wanna do is spend our money on that project because it seems like the most critical project when there might be something else.
Well, so what
Such
else
as
has you,
electrical.
well, okay, we know about the electrical, we've
Right.
talked about the money for the
What
electrical
about
this
the
year.
rest of the bypass stations? So how many more were planned besides what was just completed?
That was it so far, we haven't looked at the
Well, I thought the-
Montero force main yet.
Oh, for some reason I thought we didn't do.
No,
all.
we took in a fair number of them, but,
4?
And
But
we have
where-
generators, we need to look at replacing generators,
Sure.
we need to look at replacing pumps. I think the pumps, to me, some of the pumps are very critical.
do you have any in particular in mind?
The pumps at Portola are the ones that look the worst, just visually, but we'd have to assess them. If you lost a pump, you could potentially lose pumps before you lose your
Mhm.
force main.
Mhm.
So we need to look at that, and make sure that the money that's being spent is being spent where it needs to be first, not that the other projects aren't gonna happen. I would say your electrical at the plant, and this is just, very informal, not having looked at the whole picture yet, the plant is much lower priority. Electrical, the pump stations, very high priority. So, there's some shifting around that's gonna happen. All these things are gonna get scheduled, including the force main. There's no question that the force main needs to be looked at, but I don't think it's,
Well, I'm not
We don't have to
comfortable, I'm not
start
comfortable
tomorrow.
with the generalized approach of, we're gonna go sort it all out with the managers and bring you back a package. I don't like that at all, and I won't support that.
okay.
This has been a very hands-on board for years, and I don't intend to relinquish our responsibilities for oversight.
Okay,
We are able to deal in these kind of matters in terms of prioritization. So really, I'm gonna encourage you very strongly to bring us priorities as soon. And I really want to be able to ask questions like this about where we stand on various items. We have a CIP now.
The
And-
CIP
And I
currently
heard, I
has-
heard your comment
yeah.
earlier, and I get it, you don't like it.
I don't recommend
But-
spending 2 million on relocating the electrical building in the first 2 years. I do not recommend that. You have other things to do
Well,
first.
then, if you're gonna be talking in the generalities that way, I expect you to bring something forward concrete immediately.
Okay,
Because the problem that we had with the electrical, if we get inundated, we won't have a plant.
okay.
We'll be
Well,
completely out
Why don't we
with
bring,
absolutely no plan B for recovering the plant.
okay,
So if you're
So
gonna
I'll
tell me that
put
something's
that in
more
the
important than
comments,
that, if you're gonna tell me that something's more important than that, I
Yeah.
don't want you holding off. You need to bring that to the front.
so,
And I don't know that I'm gonna agree with you, but I at least want the information to work with.
okay. We can bring it, I can bring it to you, you know, I'm trying to engage the managers and it takes time. I can bring something to you next meeting.
So I'd like to comment. So while we're a hands-on board, I respectfully disagree, Scott. I think it's good if the managers of our agencies collaborate with the SAM GM, whether it's Vivian or somebody else, and they bring perspective back. And then,
I'm not opposed to
please
that.
let me finish.
I'm not opposed to that.
Then we have the ability to say, oh, this has been considered and it has additional input. It's not raw data, it's synthesized input from across our agencies,
Mhm.
and we can act on that. And furthermore, I particularly like the idea of stepping back and looking at the big picture for our CIP and what's the most critical thing, model the system if we have to, look at the system overall and what is the most critical thing, as opposed to playing whack-a-mole.
Now, but see, that's not in opposition to anything I'm saying.
Well, you kind of came out kind of strong about, I don't
Well,
want to see something in
I
January.
asked a very simple question about something that is directly related to something that we acted on tonight. So really, that's not something where I expect to have to, come back in a month and get the answer to that. It really
So
isn't.
are
This is fundamental.
Are you opposed to the interim GM working with our
Let me remind you that the CIP that we currently have was a joint project that involved all the managers.
Yeah.
Right? So,
And I'm
If-
I'm also getting new information, and I think it's smart to
I'm not opposed to the
look at
new
information we
information.
have.
I'm not opposed to the new information, but if there's something so critical that you think it's much higher priority than the electrical system problem that we had that nearly killed somebody,
Right.
that's not something to sit on and wait for a couple of months.
Right.
All right.
I hear what you're saying, and I know that there have been a lot of issues that have come up that have a lot of urgency, so I completely hear what you're saying. And so the time frame that I was, describing was intended to bring a lot of people together and, schedules are hard and all that. I have no problem at all coming here to the next meeting with a more definitive plan. I think that we can, other than one manager, maybe we can even get Chuck up. Chuck said his availability, he's not available till later in the month, but other than, we can get all the managers here at the same time, and we can have, an hour and a half discussion at the board meeting and get through some of these things. There's no reason why we couldn't do that, and I understand the
Let me be
importance of
really
doing
clear. The board manages
it. Yeah,
this.
I
all right?
understand, I know.
Do you?
Yes, I do.
So what I just heard you say, and let me tell you how I heard it,
Okay,
was the board member has asked for information with some energy because you're telling me that there's something more urgent than the most urgent thing that we, as an agency, thought we understood. So it's real important to bring the managers in for that next meeting. That seems really non sequitur to me, and I wanted to be just really clear that while I very much want the managers being involved and weighing in and being exposed to all the information and taking in all their feedback, just decisions are still going to be made here.
right.
Some agencies are going to work differently, and some may want their managers to be in the lead on making these assessments and judgments. That's fine. Others work differently, and mine in particular works differently, and we are a member of this agency. So there's this increasing push to make the work of the board be run more by the professionals, and that is not the public policy that my agency is interested in seeing.
Okay.
Keep us fully involved,
Yeah.
our general manager is great, and I'm really glad that you're bringing him in, but I don't want things of urgency gated on whether or not a manager is available. This board has a responsibility for oversight.
Okay.
And I'm going on stronger because I see you digging in on this, and I'm just gonna be really clear.
Yeah.
Hear what I'm asking for.
And I hear you, and I understand that this board makes the decisions, I completely hear you. And I mean, it's just not how I've operated before, but that's not that's my, you know, I need to change. As long as this management group doesn't somehow subvert what we're trying to do, you know, to what I'm trying to do to address your needs as the board, I'm okay with it. I've just seen that happen, where I'm trying to match what the board, you know, meet what the board wants, and then the managers come in and do their thing, and then, you know, in the end, you don't have any agreement, and projects don't get implemented, and it becomes very difficult. But if this management group is in tune with that, which I would guess the management group is, I haven't been here.
Well, in the past couple of years, we've actually, as Jim pointed out, we've gotten a couple of really big, important things done.
Yeah,
So we're getting them done.
yeah,
I'm a little concerned by the notion of, you know, honestly, you're an interim manager.
yeah.
And the notion of the CIP needs to be, you know, turned upside down, I'm a little surprised by that. I don't expect an interim manager to be in the position of reshaping the agency. I expect
do.
an interim, that's fine.
I expect an interim manager to use the best of his or her abilities to run this organization. It's not, let's put more Band-Aids on until we get the new person. It's, you're an interim manager, you're a pro, you run the organization, and if in your judgment you see something important, you bring it forward. And I commend those efforts, and I commend the observations that have been made, and the idea of collaborating through a workshop made sense. Vivian mentioned that to me on our tour. I said that's a great idea, because I value the professional opinions of our interim manager. I value the opinions of our city manager and the people that support Sam at the city. And when we collaborate before these meetings, I get their input. I share my perspective. Sometimes they make a lot of sense. Sometimes I disagree with them, but it's valuable input that I bring to the table here. And we bring in a pro, and that pro says that, hey, maybe we're missing something important. Well, you know what? I want to hear that.
I'm not saying don't hear it.
Well, you're making a lot of noise, and I don't know where you're going with it.
Dude, I asked a really simple, I asked a really simple question. I asked a really simple question.
I don't know what you're beating at. I don't, that's,
Okay,
maybe
great.
try to get to a
Scott.
point, that would be helpful.
Well, here,
I'm happy to wrap it up, but you asked, you don't understand what I'm going at here. I asked a pretty simple question about the status of our force main. It was on our agenda tonight. I'm not asking some, you know, completely off the wall question. And the way I brought the question was, I recall, because I was here when we authorized the thing, that we weren't going to be able to do everything that we needed to do. And I also recall that during the course of the project, we came to understand that some parts of that line may be in much worse condition than we thought, because we hadn't been able to get in there and televise it before. And so now we have new information. This is a very good point at which to ask the follow-up question, what's the next step on that? And what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that that's really not the biggest priority. And I'm also hearing that the big thing that we thought was the biggest priority is not the biggest priority. And now I'm sitting here going, you know, I don't know why this is news and why I'm having to tease this out. I want this stuff front burnered, okay? I want us well informed on this. And so as I'm saying this, I'm getting some resistance. Yes, I'm going to push back on this. I'm an elected official. I've got responsibility to do some oversight on this stuff. I'm not opposed to the managers being involved. I'm not opposed to our professionals bringing us their professional judgment. I do think that if an interim manager is going to take initiative, that it be with the blessing of the board from the get-go. So revisiting the CIP, reshaping the CIP, turning the priorities, shifting them, this is something I want done with the board awareness and approval, okay? And I don't want surprises. And right now I'm very surprised to find out that the rest of the force main is being treated as a lower priority, that the electrical is being treated as a lower priority, and that there's a full CIP reshaping underway. This is news to me. I'm glad that it's a line on interim manager's report, and we had a little bit of discussion up front, but I'm finding out there's a whole lot more there. This board needs to be setting the priorities. If the manager, to your point, if the manager wants to bring forward things that in her professional judgment require the board's attention, let's do that. Get us on board, and then you won't find me resisting you this way.
No, I completely agree
But
with.
isn't
I
any
do.
change to the CIP, doesn't that have to be brought to the board for us to decide whether or not
There's
we
no
agree
argument
with the
there.
recommendation to reorder it?
There's no argument there.
I'm talking about if she feels the need in her professional judgment to reorder the CIP to reflect priorities that she believes are different. I don't want to wait on this, because anything that is that important, that's going to take some work, and it's something where I believe that we need to be made aware of it at the earliest possible opportunity, so that we can be supportive and get behind it and say, let's go do that.
Right.
But right now I'm hearing, the priorities aren't what you think. And that's not a message I as a board member want to hear unless it's at the first available opportunity.
No, I think we're all on the same page here.
I agree completely with Director Boyd, and I'm just realizing now that in my head, I've got all kinds of things that I'm thinking about, but you don't know what I'm thinking. So I have this plan, to have this workshop with managers and all this stuff, but it's only because I know what I'm seeing and thinking, but you don't. We do need to have this immediate, I think we need to have it at the next board meeting. I'm in full agreement with you.
I'd even go a step farther than that, because this tour, like I said in the beginning, was a real eye-opener. Some of the things I saw there, some of the pumps, the backup generators, I'm like, oh my God, some of these things are really, really ancient. I agree. Keep in mind here, I'm gonna be very frank here. I'm seeing a whole different viewpoint with our interim GM than I did with our past permanent GM. And I have to tell you, from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I'm much more impressed with the observations I'm hearing. I'm in agreement. I think there's a lot of things out there that are of great concern in terms of failures, in terms of spills, fines and all that. So the sooner we can tackle this, the better. My recommendation would be, I'd like to see the agency managers get together, go through the CIP, figure out what they think the priorities are. I'd like to then have a joint workshop. I think we have to keep it separate from our meeting so we can have the time, have everybody talk about what the priorities are. And I look at this from what's the most potential critical failure. If we think this is, electrical is a big deal, but it turns out something else could fail much quicker that is much more ancient and more susceptible, then I have to think that thing probably needs to get the first attention, even though we've all been focused on the electrical project. So this is, I don't think we're all in agreement yet. I think we need to have the time, and I agree it should be fairly quickly, to move this up the chain of command. At the end of the day, the board will make the final decision. But I have the feeling, from what I'm seeing and hearing, we're talking some significant money for the next few years to bring some of these things where they need to be so we don't have some of these potential failures. So I would agree, whatever the process is, I'd like to see it probably separated out of a board meeting, maybe some kind of a study session where we can really take the time and discuss each of these, hear from our agency managers, and then, once we prioritize our CIP, then we have to get into the financials.
No, that's great. I have a reaction, strong reaction. A joint workshop with the managers, no. I think that we need to have, the managers need a workshop, and that's great, and then they make a recommendation to us. I don't think we meet, I mean, we're the board, we make the decisions. The managers should be getting together and they should make recommendations, but then they make the recommendations to the board.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, let me just tell you, we have
a technical issue.
Well, actually, I mean,
we have joint meetings with our planning commission. They pass viewpoints to us, we discuss them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the council ends up making the final decision.
Yeah, but I mean,
But it's good to sit in the same room together and hear their viewpoints. I have no problem with
Could I
that.
make a suggestion, and with all due respect? Could we do it this way? I think, and maybe I don't, but I think I understand the need to come to this board soon to convey what I'm thinking, and it's just my opinion, about all of the capital needs. It's not what I'm thinking as to my opinion of exactly what needs to be done, but I have a strategy that's kind of formulating in my head based on from what I have seen from a regulatory perspective of how agencies have to manage their systems to stay in compliance with all the things we need to stay in compliance with. I would suggest that I bring that vision to this board at the next meeting. And then based on what you hear, you can direct me to either go back and change things around or not. I mean, you may listen to that and say, you know what, we don't subscribe to any of that. We think what we've been talking about for all these months is the right way to do it. Move forward with what we've been talking about. But if you think that there's some validity to looking at things a different way, then I can go back and work things through with the managers and come back with a plan.
So for the board to decide whether or not to reorder the CIP, basically we would need to evaluate for each particular thing that needs attention the balance between what's the likelihood of it happening and how bad is it if it actually happens. So the likelihood of the electrical flooding is probably fairly low, and yet the risk if it happens is huge. Whereas, you know, various other things, the risk is going to be lower, but the likelihood is going to be higher, and so, you know, we need all of those inputs to be able to decide, all right, where we can allocate resources sooner rather than a little bit later. And do you think that you have enough time to put that together for the next board meeting?
And I'm not, yeah, well, I think I have enough time to explain why we might want to look at electrical in a different way, or why we might want to look at the force main or the pump stations in a different way, and present that to you. And if you say, no, you know, what you're saying just is not enough, it's not compelling enough for me to change what we've already talked about a lot and discussed a lot and decided, you know, then I don't go forward. But if you think, well, maybe there is some validity to this and it's worth spending another month or two to try to hash this out and see if we can come up with a better way than I do. So it's not to find the answers necessarily, but it's for you to hear why I would like to seek new answers potentially.
I definitely think we
No,
need to do
I think
that.
that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I don't want you going off, I mean, I really expect an interim to work much more closely with the board seeking approval than a full-time, because you're new, there's stuff to dial into. You get too far out ahead of us, you're not gonna have the kind of support that it's gonna take to actually carry off some of the bigger things. I want whatever you do to be successful, and for that, I think we've gotta be on board, and early. That doesn't mean to, you know, forego the meeting with the managers, because you got a lot of professional capability there, but before I'm just rehashing what you
Yeah,
said.
I know, I
Let me
agree
just
with you.
remind everyone that we already met on the CIP at least 3 times this year. And this CIP that we currently have was a joint work project between our professional staff here and each of the managers, agency managers. So we do have a plan of record.
And the agency engineer.
So it's a fairly substantial joint work project. So if we're gonna upend it, let's approach it from the point of view of, you know, I know we've put a lot of work into this thing, but I've got a reason to bring you something different for your consideration. I don't want that backing in. I don't want Campbell's nose under the tent. I don't want to find out after the fact.
Right.
I mean, we've been in Montero through a number of things where we had to bring our community along to do some really big things. 5,000 people supporting a $19 million bond, for example. We spent a lot of time, you know, helping develop an understanding in the community about why on earth we'd want to do that. When we finally went to the voters to finally ask for permission, we had 81% of the people saying, please tax me. Okay, I mean, there's a good reason to put it up front and start winning the support early before, you know, if we had dropped that on the voters without that preparation, we would have had like 3% saying tax me. But I do think it really matters a lot about the success, and frankly, I'm also just really concerned interims should be, there's a different mode of operation, and I know you know that, but here I'm finding myself a little surprised. I would like, at the next opportunity, to hear more about the force main and where you think that is in terms of its needs, because it is still, that was my lead question, it's a timely matter because we're closing it out, and I just want to make sure, as we close it out, we anticipate what the next steps are.
Yeah,
I've seen us write the check and think that we're done, and over the years, it's like, you know, it's always important to say, all right, we wrote the check, what's the next check we're going to be asked to write? Because I don't want it to be a surprise later when somebody says, we've got another, what, 500, 1,000, 1,500 feet, whatever it is, that we, you know, where we've got an assessment of it. I don't even remember how much we managed to televise while we had it shut down, but anyway, that's, the CIP was in the June 24th packet. That was our most recent, I believe. That's the most recent I found.
okay.
So thank you for taking the feedback. I appreciate that.
All right, let's move on. You have other bullet items here?
I do. So I just wanted to provide an update. I have to figure out if we're gonna cancel the December meeting, when this is gonna come, but we have been waiting on the OPEB study, which is the retirement benefits study, which is required every 3 years as part of the, as an audit as a legal requirement, but also the audit was asking where it is. So that is finishing up in the next few weeks, and so then our auditors will be able to finish up their audit, and then they will be bringing their findings to the board for discussion. And we just need to figure out what the timing would be. I don't think that we can do it at November, so we might need to come to January. There's no urgency, right, to come to a December meeting? I don't think there's any urgency in
think so,
timing
no.
as to when it gets presented.
So we do need to
Just wanted to
finish.
let you know that it's coming.
Before we start the third bullet, is this appropriate for open session?
The audit? I think
No,
so.
no, the third bullet.
The third bullet, we're not gonna talk about.
Okay.
No, I put that on prematurely. And then the fourth bullet, the purchase of the model year the 2014 pickup, the reason why it's here is because it's been some time since the purchase of the pickup was authorized, and it was a 2013 truck at that time, and there have been some difficulties in getting a quote and getting the pickup, and so finally Tony was successful in getting this pickup. It's actually less money than the original, but it is a 2014 model, so we just wanted to bring it up to your attention because we're getting ready to buy it.
Before we move on to manager's report, something I forgot during the consent agenda, but it's under manager's report. Looking at the graph on the flow distribution report,
What page you on?
there's a color graph.
Oh,
that
consent
page.
agenda?
It's in the consent agenda, and that would be,
Attachment A.
4B8. Attachment A.
No.
which is roughly page 9.
I'm getting concerned again about meter readings being out of whack because I see,
The beginning of September.
yeah, I see the Half Moon Bay flow hitting the same level as GSD and in one place actually getting lower. And, you know, it's just not possible. I'm sorry, it's not possible.
There's a good explanation.
Okay?
We did some moving around of water inside the plant, so it didn't go through the mid-plant meter. Now, over this month, we're slowly putting it back in, so it should average itself out.
It should balance.
It'll balance itself out.
Okay.
We had to rescue some clarifiers, and in doing that, we took that water offline, and now we're putting it back online, so to speak.
So are you sort of saying that some of it's been deferred going through and,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Did you know, did you win the bet?
I should have put that in there.
You should have footnoted next time when there's something like that.
If you're gonna win the bet, it's really gonna help if you put an asterisk on there and ask us to explain that. Ah, that was me knowing that Leonard was gonna catch this.
Okay, item, where are we? Item 8, attorney's report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a report from our last CASA Attorneys Committee meeting, and you have a written memo in the file. Excuse me. just an update now, because this is our meeting in August. The state legislation, CEQA, has gone nowhere. It's a 2-year bill, so no, I mean, I told you this when we first started reporting it, nothing got done in CEQA. So, and secondly, there was, under this inverse condemnation legislation, where the idea was that we could share costs, nothing has been done in that. That's, again, another 2-year bill. Third, Clean Water Act revisions, nothing has been done on that. That continues to be discussed at the federal level. Then over on page 3, the volumetric water pricing, wastewater pricing, excuse me. That issue does not go away. There are certain people at the regional and state boards who don't understand why you can't introduce volume pricing in sewer charges like you do in water charges.
But Montero does it, Half Moon Bay does it.
Okay, great, you guys are ahead of the curve.
Renata doesn't, and I think we should.
Just-
Well, are you talking about which way does the price go as your volume goes up? Does your unit price go up or down?
Oh, I thought you were talking about measuring, you're talking about changing the rate based on volume, never mind. I was
No,
talking about-
Montero does that.
Oh,
Flow-based rate.
But except that you probably charge,
We charge
More.
more when you
Yeah.
buy more. It's the same way we do with the trash cans. The smaller trash can, you get at a better rate, and the bigger trash cans, it starts
You
to
get
cost-
penalized.
Well, it's not penalized, it's, there's an incentive structure built into the rates.
yeah, I misinterpreted what the meaning of volumetric.
Anyhow, there's, you can argue this the rest of the night, whether you should or should not, but some of the regulatory authorities still think we should introduce this concept, or require this concept in wastewater rates and charges. And their argument is that by doing that, we could effectively lower, if we can lower costs, we can therefore save money, the water use, get a better use of water. So that's the way, the pressure's there, it's gone nowhere. Some of the large public agencies in wastewater, some of the ones down south are very much opposed to it. So we just have to stand and watch and see what happens. In the meantime, nothing's happened.
Has there ever been any discussion of disallowing GSD's approach, which is every house pays the same? Which I think is silly, but I've been told it's a third rail, don't touch it.
Now, that is contrary to this concept.
Of the election.
Well, so my question, my question is, has there been a discussion of disallowing that approach?
No, no. And I think what you would find, and maybe Vivian can jump in, I think what you'd find in a lot of public agencies is a treatment of domestic sewage in a more equal level. So every house pays the same, it's a lot more of a flat rate, and then they try to pick up volume with the commercial and the
Well, that's
bus rate.
exactly what GSD does, but I look at it as, I have a little car, why should I pay the same at the gas station as the guy with the SUV? One vehicle each.
Which gets into the next item, which is the lifeline rates for seniors. And there is more than one public agency out there who tries to come up with a lifeline rate, which is a cheap rate for their senior citizens. And some people, like me, can say that's a great idea.
That's a good idea.
Okay, and there's others say, wait a minute, the cost the same for Copeland's house and Harvey's house as it does some of the younger guys. So that argument, and the problem you run into there, just like with the volumetric pricing arguments, is 218 issues. And they're giving these guys are using the same amount of sewer, throwing the same amount of waste into the sewer, why shouldn't they pay the same? So you can spend the rest of the night arguing about that. In the meantime, the lawyers are just sitting around talking.
It gets complicated too when you've got extended families all in house and some are the seniors. It's a complicated business.
The best analogy I have is what I call the postage stamp theory. And I can send a postcard to my neighbor across the street, and it's gonna cost me 40 cents or whatever it is. And I can send that same postcard to my uncle up in, Juneau, Alaska, and it's gonna be the same 40 cents. Can't tell me it's a cost the same to ship that postcard. But that's the way it's been in that mindset. So that's the kind of issues you're discussing.
Yeah, we see another little gotcha. We set our sewer service charges based on the wet weather usage. That tends to overlap Christmas and Thanksgiving,
Oh, yeah.
where family comes to visit. So you got a couple of seniors who live by themselves and have very low water usage all year long, except when they have the families come visit, and then you get into all sorts of pricing. Equity is tough.
It is tough, that's the bottom line, is it just, you're not gonna, one size doesn't fit all.
Well, and then hopefully the sewer is the bottom line.
And what I think, so to speak, it's getting late, so.
And by the way, Joe, pretty soon you're just gonna cut a dollar bill in half and tape it to the envelope to mail.
But this sort of goes back to the volumetric pricing. One of the big objectives, or one of the big objections by some of the member agencies is the regional board telling them what to do. A lot of the public agencies feel it's best to let these decisions be made at the local level, because maybe what is best in your community may not be the same as best in the next guy's community. Okay, then down into litigation. The first one, an interesting case. If all of you, whether you're a sanitary district or a city, you have a limit as to when you have to go out for public bidding. Whether it's 15,000 in case of sanitary districts, which has been incorporated into the JPA provisions here, or I don't even know what the limit is in the city, but you have some limit at the city, and any public works over that, you have to call for public bids on it. For example, the Granada Force Main project was a public bid project. Okay.
So, which way did the court go on this?
Well, so in this case, it was clearly a construction, it was clearly a project that exceeded $15,000 in cost. But the public agency said this was not a public works project, it was maintenance. And the court says no, it was a public works project and you have to go to public bid on it. The district is appealing that case, and I think Vivian is familiar with this particular agency up there. What are they, pipe cracking or repairing?
They're pipe bursting, so they're pulling ahead through the pipe, bursting it, pulling the pipe in.
And their argument was this is just maintenance, they're doing so much per year, and they don't have to go out to the public bidding requirement. Court said, you're wrong, you've got to go to public bid on this. They're appealing that case right now. It's an interesting case because we were just talking earlier, we've had instances where we've done repair work here. And now,
Who took them to court?
the contractors union. And you can see, and Alan, this flows to, in the economy, if you're sitting out there looking for work for your employees, and you see these guys over here doing their own work, that's exactly what that sort of triggers this guy.
Wow.
That's actually interesting, because the pipe bursting might well be the best way to maintain the line. I mean, it's, if it's a small line.
One of the things you find
could-
being
you could
over the
pothole
hill,
it and patch
if you
and
start
everything.
going out for bid on little dinky projects,
Large.
you turn off contractors.
Yeah.
They don't wanna keep bidding on things.
Montero have done a
It,
lot of
it it
same
ruins the
size
process.
but it
We
does
fell out of
bursting
Ocean
on
Colony,
the
we would call them guys to do bids, and after a while, they just stopped coming. And then when you really wanna get bids on the bigger projects, they won't even come.
The other one.
Well, I certainly am interested in Jim keeping us informed on this, because, I think that the agencies that have field crew, and Granada doesn't, might be concerned about somebody coming along and saying, you can't use your own people to do this project. I mean, that's really silly.
But that's what this case, that's the argument on the other side of this case.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'll keep you posted, it is an interesting, it's interesting. The next two, these next two I spoke of down there at the attorney's meeting. The first one is this Mission Springs case, and what this is a Proposition 218 case. The question is, through the initiative power that's provided in Prop 218, can the ratepayers roll back rates through the initiative power, which is provided in Prop 13. There's a specific provision that allows for the circulation of initiative, shall not be impeded by the public agency. In this particular case, this community circulated a petition, and they succeeded in getting a petition which rolled the rates back to below the level that the public agency said was safe for operating the system. You follow? Okay? And the court says you can't do that.
The court says you can't do
You
that.
cannot do that. In other words, in which is a major, and in my opinion, is a great step forward for at least figuring out where the limits are with respect to Prop 13, Prop 218, and all these rate setting stuff. So it seems to me that if the public agency, as a legislative body, goes through and figures out this is what it costs to operate our system, we're not making any money here, this is what it costs to operate our system, it's going to be more difficult for a group of disgruntled property owners to circulate a petition saying we want your rates chopped, when you're going into court and saying that's going to affect the public safety.
Well, maybe that's why sanitary districts were explicitly excluded from 218, the inability of some judge to read the plain language notwithstanding. Because there wasn't ever supposed to be a 218 hearing at all for sewer and water.
That's right. Expressly written, black and white.
So anyhow, I think this is I mean, so many of these cases on Prop 13 and 218, we've been losing. This is I think a good case. The second one, just one of interest, I don't think it applies to any of you guys here, but this was an interesting set of facts. You have a city down in Southern California, Huntington Beach, and they had these little pockets of unincorporated area, and they wanted to, and the city was levying a couple different taxes. And when they annexed the property into the city, the people didn't want to pay, the people in the annexed area didn't want to have to pay the taxes that the city people were paying. And they said, well, we didn't get to vote on that. That's a Prop 218, Prop 13, you violated everything. We don't have to pay those taxes. And the court here, once again, great decision, said, no, 218 was not intended to apply to annexation
You
proceedings.
could have voted against the annexation.
You could have voted against the annexation. So,
Wow.
so anyhow, two good cases on 218. So anyhow, enough said. These are fun cases for me. But, and I think that's, I'm sort of the 218 guy.
And you have yet another 218 listed here.
Oh, what's the other one here?
Citizens Association of Sunset
That's
Beach.
that's the annexation case.
Oh, that's the Huntington
That's the
Beach.
annexation.
For some reason, I wasn't visualizing Huntington Beach as in Orange County, but it is, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So anyhow, the city of Huntington Beach was levying a couple different taxes, I've forgotten what they were, and the people that were being forced into annexation into the city through the LAFCO process said, well, you can't levy that tax on us because we didn't get to vote on it. That's an interesting argument. The court said no.
Well, you know, when the mosquito abatement district annexed the coast side, we actually have to pay more than the people on the bay side.
We have bigger mosquitoes.
Because the district originally started over there, so they get a sliver of the property tax, the 1%, and we don't.
That's the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Item 9, director's reports.
I have a report, I meant to bring this up in public comment, but, Vivian, do we still have that $5,000 outstanding for the wet weather project for the grass?
That's correct. We're waiting for it to rain and to see if the grass will revegetate, or the site will revegetate
Well,
sufficiently.
I have a question, is there any danger of that company taking a lien against Sam? Could it become more complicated? Is $5,000 worth of huge legal fees if they take action against us? Jim?
I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought there was a communication with the contractor what we were doing.
Right, there was a communication,
Which is
and they
okay.
didn't fulfill the full contract requirements.
Because they did water.
So the contractor is okay?
There's a dialogue between the two parties.
Okay,
on that
so
$5,000.
no one's gonna make any bold moves?
I'm sure they're not okay,
But there.
but I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Right, there was communication. We haven't received a formal protest.
Okay, okay, that's fine. Okay, so it's got, we have to wait for it to rain. See what grows up, Leonard, what grows. All the seeds you planted, stuck up in. Illegal plants.
Any other director's reports? Any public comment? we are adjourned.
Good job.
Good thing I didn't bet on it, because I had in my head that we